Hello, welcome to Plant Party. We're happy to have you here today. Today we're cooking up natives. Plant Party is hosted by Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Plant Party is a quarterly webinar intended for advanced plant training and fun education. I'm Megan Clayton, professor and extension range specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. My co-hosts are Charles Kneiper, state resource conservationist with USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, and Tim Sigmund, the private lands program leader with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. We have 17 wonderful door prizes we'll be giving away today as a part of our event. Our door prize donors today are committed to supporting you in your quest to learn more about plants. I'd like to thank Bamert Seed, Corteva AgriScience, NView Range and Pasture, Native American Seed, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service for donating these neat prizes.
Good morning, everybody. Let's get some housekeeping out of the way. First, we'll be moving quickly through our 5 presentations today. Please feel free to type your questions into the question and answer box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer them privately through there. We'll be sharing the link to the recorded webinar in about a week to all registered participants, but not the actual presentation. So be sure to take your own notes as we go.
Our first presenters today are Eric Knight and Stacy Copeland. This husband and wife team are foragers and environmental educators from Austin, Texas. They are passionate about incorporating wild foods into their daily lives and helping others do the same. They founded Local Leaf LLC, which can be found at www.localleaf.com, where they wild harvest and sell their product Yopan Matcha and lead edible plant walks. Eric and Stacy will be presenting on pellitory pesto. Thanks for kicking off our plant party, y'all. Take it away.
Well, yeah, thanks for the intro. We're born and raised Austinites and self-proclaimed nature nerds. So happy to be here today to share about a special plant that we like to forage, especially this time of year. So, I know you kind of did the intro, but just some further information. We've been, foraging together for a while now. Again, you mentioned the Local Leaf Yopan matcha that we make. We sell that at the Whole Foods in Central Texas. We do different plant walks with a bunch of different kind of botanical gardens and things like that around Texas. And we also are the authors of Falcon Guides Foraging Texas. So that's what that looks like. So we'll jump right into it. So today we'll be talking about Pennsylvania pellitory, and Stacy will be going through one of our favorite recipes with pellitory pesto. So we'll get to that at the end. But first we'll kind of talk about some kind of identification and other information about pellitory. So first, scientific name is Parieteria pennsylvanica, and it let's see. So we've got the range map here. It covers a good bit of Texas, but not found as much in the Panhandle and like far East Texas. But most counties you can find it. It'll be in like really kind of shady areas. A lot of times it's under like junipers and mesquite trees in kind of moister soils. I've seen it in, sandy soils, clay soils. I've seen it growing on limestone. It's pretty variable, but it's usually in the shade. So I think I have, a picture here. This was just from Bastrop this weekend. I happened to be out there, and you can see it's under an eastern red cedar, which is a juniper, and pretty common ground cover in forested areas like that. And it can actually be pretty dominant in spring. It'll be like one of the dominant ground covers in the forest there. So really common, but it's often overlooked because it's not very showy. So the flowers are kind of little and green, and it doesn't really get that tall. So a lot of people kind of miss it. But it's a pretty cool native. And it, luckily for us, you can find it in a lot of the state, and it's pretty common. So for identification, so this is in the nettle family, Urticaceae. So you can kind of see if you're familiar with the nettle family, fairly similar characteristics. It doesn't have any stinging hairs, but it does have kind of similar flowering structure. So these are kind of the bullet points I go through when I'm trying to identify pellitory or trying to teach it to others. So first, which isn't really on here, but the time of year you find this is really like early winter to kind of mid-spring. It'll come up really small. It'll be like, an inch tall in early winter. So talking like I even saw it in November, December, and then it'll get up like right now, at least where I'm at, it's maybe 6 inches tall, but it can get up to a foot tall, and then it kind of dies back after that. So it's no good to eat after that. But right now is kind of a prime time to harvest it. So yeah, it can get to a foot tall. It's a weak-stemmed annual, so it's pretty flimsy plant. It's soft and pubescent to the touch, so it's pretty fuzzy. And then the other thing, so like, because it's fairly generic looking plant, so you got to have a couple different ways to identify it. So another thing I like to show people is that if you look at it up close, especially when it's young, and you can kind of see it in the picture here, but it's got kind of a semi-translucent stem, and the leaf petioles especially are kind of translucent, so that can be helpful. Some of the things that might be confused with it don't really have that. I've got a picture later, but when it's really young, it's got these kind of distinct little pink dots at the leaf axil. So I can show you a picture. Leaves are alternate. They're kind of diamond shaped. When they're really small, it's kind of like a fat diamond, and then they get kind of elongated. And it's entire, so meaning the leaf doesn't have any serrations or anything like that. And then you can see in this picture here, it's actually got the flowers out. They're just right along the stem at the leaf axil, so they're really small. And I think I have another picture. Yeah. So there's one of the flowers right there, just kind of a little tiny little flower right at the leaf axil. And then, yeah, especially for harvesting, it's got a really weak root system. So, if you're harvesting it, it's fairly easy just to pull up, even if you're not really trying. So, yeah, that's usually what I like to cover for identification. Here's just some other pictures. So these ones, going back a little bit, those leaves which are longer is when it's a little more mature, but this picture here is when it's smaller. So this picture was probably in like December, maybe really early January, something like that. So you can see the leaf shape's a little different. And then this is also a young plant. So you can kind of see, it's kind of hard to tell, but if you look at the base of the leaf petiole, so where the leaf stalk comes off the stem, there's a little kind of like pink dot there. And that, I think it's just like the beginning of a flower bud, but it's pretty easy to see when you're harvesting it when it's really small, and that can be a good distinguisher. And you can see the root system over here is pretty small. Okay, so we're talking about edible plants. So what can you do with it? So yeah, first, you're really only finding it in winter and early spring. But it's I think one of our better tasting wild greens. It's got a cucumbery flavor, kind of like if you ate, it's like a lighter version of if you ate a cucumber peel, kind of that type of flavor. Some people actually call it cucumber weed or cucumber plant. And then interestingly, so Parieteria pennsylvanica is our main species that's native, but we also have two other related Parieterias. So we've got Judaica, which is invasive actually, and it's native to Europe and like Israel, a lot of that part of the world, and it's actually called, the common name for that pellitory is pellitory of the wall. And so that it actually grows on walls and castles and stuff in Europe. You'll see it just like sprouting out of the side of a wall, or on sidewalks and things like that. So really common over there, and it's invasive in a couple urban areas in Texas. And then in South Texas, we've also got Floridana. So they look pretty similar though. They're not that distinct, and they're also edible. So anyway, and yeah, so what do you do with it? So it's best eaten raw. I think it keeps most of its cucumber flavor when it's raw, but you can also well, you can add it to salads raw. We steam it with butter sometimes, or one of our favorite things, which Stacy will go over, is really simple pellitory pesto that comes out really nice. So I'll turn it over to Stacy.
Hi. Yeah, so this recipe is out of our book. I think I made a small edit to this and used pecans instead of pine nuts because they're local and really rich in flavor. You could use this, you could sub in the pellitory for your traditional like Italian basil leaves if you wanted. The recipe that I provided doesn't have any dairy in it. So it's just a really nice, like light, fresh, very spring version of your traditional kind of heavier pesto. And yeah, it's really simple. You just chuck all the ingredients listed above into, we like to use a Vitamix. You could use your food processor and just blend it up, and you can keep it in the fridge for about a week. You can put it on toast or crackers. But yeah, it's just a really nice, light, simple recipe to start your spring cooking with. And it's everywhere right now. So we really enjoy using it. Thank you.
Thanks for that presentation, Eric and Stacy.
Yeah.
We're going to go right into our second presentation with Dr. Mark Meriwether Vorderbruggen. Dr. Vorderbruggen is often somewhat jokingly described as a scientist raised by wolves, having an MS in medicinal chemistry and a PhD in physical organic chemistry. He brings science into the world of wild, edible, and medicinal plants. On the science side, he has 16 patents and numerous articles and research journals from his career as a chemist. But his true love is plants and the miracles they contain. Since 2008, his website, www.foragingtexas.com, has been one of the top wild, edible, medicinal plant sites on the internet. He's written countless foraging articles for a wide variety of magazines, taught hundreds of foraging walkabouts, appeared on radio, TV, and podcast galore, wrote the acclaimed books Idiot's Guide Foraging and Outdoor Adventures Guide Foraging, and was co-creator of the Wazoo Survival Gear Foraging Bandana. In 2020, he made the biggest leap of his life to become the medicine man for Medicine Man Plant Company, where he can finally bring forth the ancient plants to help with modern issues. In addition to all this, in 2024, he started the Texas Village Healer Initiative with the goal of training an herbalist healer for every town, village, and neighborhood. I'll turn it over to you, Meriwether. Tell us about Goldenrod infused pasta.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you, Charles, for that intro. So let's just jump right in. Yeah, Goldenrod infused pasta. This has always been a big favorite of my classes. And to better understand it, let's first start with Goldenrod. But I guess you covered all the things of my website, my books, my herbal supplements, so we could skip over that. Goldenrod. According to the USDA, there are 77 species of goldenrod across North America. So there's a lot of this type of plant, and all of them can be used for this recipe. In Texas, we actually have 21 different species. And if you go to the range maps on Foraging Texas website, you will see where all you can find it. And it's pretty much everywhere, every county in Texas has some form of goldenrod. Just to mention also on the Foraging Texas website, www.foragingtexas.com, currently it's 230 different plants and mushrooms with multiple pictures, range maps, recipes, if there's mimics, how to tell apart from the mimic, everything you need to learn the wild edible and medicinal plants of Texas. In the fall, it's very easy to identify goldenrod. It's a tall plant with a pyramid of yellow flowers at the top. Very, very, very distinctive. Nothing else really looks like it in the fall. But the rest of the time of the year, because this recipe actually calls for the leaves, it can be a little bit trickier to find. And right now, this is more or less what it looks like. This kind of a small and indistinct, indescript sort of green plant. Here. So it can be somewhat tricky to find if you don't know these certain tips. And as a forager, one of the things I try and tell people is when you're looking at a plant to try and properly identify it, you want to match up at least 5 structural features. Now, if you go to the Foraging Texas website, each plant and mushroom has 12 structural features listed for it. So there's no excuse not to match up 5. But right now, especially for beginners, one of the easiest things to do is look for last year's goldenrod. So you'll have these long, tall spikes. They'll be about the thickness of a pencil. They may be 3 to 4 feet tall, brown, covered with dried leaves lower, and at the top will be this brown, fuzzy pyramid of last year's seeds and flower buds. So you will find it usually growing in a stand because underground, the goldenrod is connected by rhizomes. So you'll have the plant and you'll have the rhizome, and it will go and another plant will be connected. So the rhizomatous root is one of the structural features. But when you find the dried plants, you follow it down to the bottom, and around it will be this New Year's growth. These things start showing up. The new growth really starts showing up as early as December, when the old plants have just died. So in Texas, there's pretty much goldenrod available all year round. So you find the older dead stalks, follow it down to the ground to find the little small plants like this. Also, you may see it, we're actually late enough now where the goldenrod in a lot of places may be 1 foot to 18 inches tall. So other structural features to help you identify it, it will have a round stem. The stem will be smooth, hairless. It'll often be brown or reddish brown lower down, and then up higher, as you can see in the picture, the fresh growth is a more green color. The leaves are alternating, so they zigzag down the stem. The edges of the leaves are what we call serrated. And one of the things I always like to point out is if you stroke the leaf from the base to the tip, it feels small, but if you stroke from the tip to the base, it's actually rough, like a cat's tongue. And what this is telling us is on the leaves, there's very fine hairs that are all pointing in one direction, that direction being towards the tip of the leaf. So structural features, very, very key thing to use to identify it. Goldenrod is one of those that really, the only close mimic is also edible. So this may look like goldenrod. It has that serrated leaf edge. It has the elongated leaves. A little hard to see in this picture, but if we move up, this plant, the mimic to goldenrod, is covered in hairs. And so what this is horseweed. And that is in the fleabane family. Absolutely delicious. In fact, making this pasta with horseweed is also a really tasty. So you don't have to worry about accidentally poisoning yourself or anything like that. If you somehow miss the fact that horseweed is covered with hairs, very noticeable, long visible hairs, whereas the goldenrod hairs, no hairs on the stem and very fine, almost microscopic hairs on the leaves. Also, if you pull up the horseweed, it has a taproot. It doesn't have the rhizome connecting to it. All right, so golden scheist nudeln. When I told my mom years ago that one of the things I'll be teaching in my classes was how to make her noodles, she actually got really upset. And she said, "Oh, Those are shice noodles. That's poor people's food. To see that, they'll know we were poor. And it's like, Mom, you don't understand. Poor is what everyone is right now. And any way we can help people extend their food just makes life better. But yeah, growing up, she referred to these when she make them, as Scheiss Nudeln. And I apologize to any German speakers out there who actually know what that means. So we're just going to jump and call it goldenrod pasta. And what's really nice about this recipe, like I said, it's very, very, very popular in my classes because it's fun to make, it's cheap to make, it's easy to make, and you can get a bunch of people together to do it and mix it. So it's a really great social activity. So one of the things I tell the students after the class is, now that you know how to do this, you need to go and have a pasta party with your neighbors and do it with them and teach them. And just make my mom's life miserable because all these people now are making her noodles. But it's fun, it's easy. So the basic recipe, you start with 1 cup of goldenrod leaves, and the leaves you want are right at the tip. So one of the really cool things about goldenrod is if you pick this top part and still leave some of the green, instead of the plant just kind of ending there, normally goldenrod will just form 1 stalk. But if you pinch it off, it will branch out and form 3 to 5 new stalks coming up. And so by pinching it off and taking this little bit for your food, actually increases in the fall how many flowers will be available, how many goldenrod flowers will be available for the bees, because it's often the last food of the bees before winter. So you're actually helping nature by pinching off the tops of the goldenrod right now. Whoops. Okay. The other ingredients, 2 eggs, 2 cups all-purpose flour, ½ teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 cup of water. The first thing you want to do is actually blanch and cool the goldenrod leaves. And for this, I still leave them all connected to the stem, but I'll drop this in boiling water for 30 seconds, pull it out, and then immediately transfer the hot goldenrod leaves into ice water to quickly cool them down. And this is to prevent overcooking of the pasta, but it also, the blanching step, those of you who freeze green beans or carrots and things like that know, blanching helps preserve the overall structural integrity of the plant because it breaks down or denatures the protein whose purpose is to break the plant down after the plant dies. So we want to, if we're going to store the goldenrod for a longer period of time, blanching is a very important step. It also makes the noodles, the leaves softer, which improves the texture, in my opinion. So stick the leaves in the boiling water 30 seconds, then pull them out, transfer them to ice water, cool them off, pat them dry. Second step. Now we are going to start combining everything. I'll combine the flour and salt first and mix that up. Then we'll throw in the chopped leaves. So I guess I should have included, step 1.5, where you chop the leaves up. And you want small pieces, like half the size of your pinky nail. Part of the size depends on what sort of pasta you're going to make with it. Are you going to make fine noodles? Are you going to make lasagna noodles? Are you going to make ravioli? Because you can do all this stuff with the pasta. But you you combine the dry ingredients, the flour and the salt, then mix in the goldenrod leaves, and then finish up with the eggs and mix it all together. Add in the water, and then you start kneading the dough. Because remember, the kneading, where you're stretching and twisting and kind of just mash together, what you're doing there is you're building up long strands of gluten, which is what's necessary to give the noodles structural integrity. So they will stay together in the boiling water. Now, if you're in a hurry, you can just take this dough now, roll it into little balls, and drop it into like chicken soup and boil it, and you get these like I don't want to call it egg drop soup, but like this egg noodle matzo ball sort of thing going on. But if you actually want noodles, you need to knead the dough. You knead it for 5 minutes. You don't want to over knead it. If you over knead it, then the noodles actually become kind of tough. but just knead it for 5 minutes. A glass of wine during this period is always a good thing. Step 4, now you want to let the dough rest for at least 10 minutes. So I like to just take the clumps of dough, form it into balls, and just lay a towel over them and let them sit there for 10 minutes. And during that time, the gluten is continuing to form these long strands and cross-link and to make the resulting noodles more stable, more structurally sound. Next step is simply roll it out and cut up the dough. I mean, if you have one of those pasta maker, hand crank type things, or the thing that attaches to the KitchenAid, send it through that. Well, like I said, at this point, you can really make any sort of noodle you want out of it. It depends on how much effort you want to put into it. One of the speakers today, Rachel, she's in charge of Cato Mounds Historic Site, and I teach out there twice a year. This fall, we're doing a whole day event, foraging and cooking, and the plan is to make goldenrod infused pasta, specifically ravioli stuffed with mule deer and farmer's cheese, and if we're lucky, some wild forage mushrooms. But the type of noodle you make from this is really limited by time and your effort. Whatever noodle you want to make, you can make from this. Now, you can either use it immediately, and by immediately, you still usually want to dry it for at least 30 minutes. That just helps build, again, the structural integrity. Or if you let it dry for about 2 hours, at that point, then you can store it in an airtight container for weeks. You can even freeze it and keep it longer. Theoretically, you could keep it longer, but most of the time, my food safety instruction is coming to haunt me now. One of the things as a foraging instructor, I had to get the whole food safety training, and so I like using it immediately or the next day or within like the next 3 days. But if you're gonna wait a few days, let it air dry, and then you can store it, like I said, in an airtight container or a Ziploc bag, anything like that. Some examples of the noodles, more of a linguine on the one side, and from a previous class out at Cato Mounds making ravioli there, stuffing it can be used any way. All right, I went through this very fast because it's that simple. It's that easy, that much fun. So give it a try. Go to foragingtexas.com to see, like I said, over 130 other edible medicinal plants. Or if you got some health issues you're trying to take care of, contact me at Medicine Man Plant Co. and I'll put my herbal scientific knowledge to work to help you. At this point, I'm turning it back over to the host. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Meriwether. That was great.
Next up, we have my good friend and co-worker, Heidi Krieger-Bailey, who will speak about rubus salsa. Heidi Bailey is a TPWD wildlife biologist for 4 counties in the Post Oak Savannah ecoregion and is based out of the big town of Van, Texas. She graduated from Texas A&M University in 1995 with a degree in animal science and started with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department back in 1999. After stints as a horse trainer, ranch hand, and assistant feedlot manager, among others. Heidi has always had a passion for the outdoors, and signing on with TPWD was a good fit. As a biologist, her responsibilities include conducting wildlife surveys, providing technical guidance to landowners and managers and hunters, wildlife disease monitoring, conducting outreach programs and hunts, and performing habitat management and restoration activities. Within the job, wildlife tracking, conducting prescribed fire, and restoring native prairie are some of the things she is most passionate about. She's conducted prescribed burns across the state and considers educating landowners about the benefits of fire a top priority. When she is not working, she enjoys windsurfing, fly fishing, hog hunting, trail running, gardening, and cooking. If it don't hurt going down, it's no good Mexican food. Welcome to the plant party, Heidi. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, y'all. Anyway, so I was pretty tickled when Tim hollered at me to ask if I'd be interested in sharing my rubus salsa and talking a little bit about the plant. I love plant party things, and so this is kind of a neat deal to share a little bit of my job as well as my passion. So when thinking about rubus, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Pinky in the Brain. This may be dating myself a little bit, but honestly, this is what I think about when I think about rubus. It's everywhere, and it truly does want to take over the world. And I'll get into a little bit more about that here in just a second. So it's found nearly worldwide. It's actually in the rose family. You can find it all the way from the tropics to the tundra. It can handle the hot stuff as well as the pretty dang cold stuff. You'll find it in the sun or in the shade, although generally you'll get more fruit the more sun it gets. All sorts of soil types, except for it really doesn't like to have wet feet for a long time. Acidic or alkaline soils, so pretty much you can find it in most spots across Texas. And then wet or dry. There's a whole bunch of rubus species that like to live in the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere where they get a heck of a lot more rain than even we do. So to me, this is the poster child for folks who think, are there a whole bunch of species, maybe less species? Are we going to lump them all together in one group, or are we going to fit them all, into a whole bunch of different genus, or excuse me, a bunch of species? I did a little bit of research on this, and depending on where you look, between 250 and 1475, that's pretty widespread there. And then you've got the hybrids on top of that. So, simplification is the name of the game for some folks. And then for other folks, it's just the more, the better. In all honesty, the more I researched this, the more I thought, it would have been nice if we did just call this the Southern Dewberry salsa recipe and just been done with it. Collectively, most folks call it brambles. Although to me, smilax, greenbrier, that's a pretty brambly thing too. But these are some of the variants that you could find. Raspberries fall into this category, as well as a lot of these things I've never even heard of. Seems to me like the last two there, loganberries and marionberries, just some plant taxonomists got bored and just started naming things after their kids. So in the U.S., once again, depending on where you look, you'll find anywhere from 25 to 220 plus species, just depending on what reference you use. Long story short, I've got a couple of quotes here that basically just say, in order to make this manageable, kind of simplifying things, or in this case, lumping things, is going to be the best way to go. The nice thing for us is that if you go by INAT, then we just get 6 species in Texas. Himalayan blackberry, northern or common dewberry, Chesapeake blackberry, Pennsylvania blackberry, Rio Grande blackberry, and then southern dewberry. And fortunately for us, 90% of all the rubus species are going to be this southern dewberry here. So identification. Once again, this is a little tricky because we're dealing with so many different hybrids and variants and species. So just some general rules here. You can call it thorny or technically they're called prickles, or hairy, and those are bristles, or it may have both. Once again, unfortunately, since it's one of our main species, it's an easy one to ID. If it's got prickles and bristles, then it's going to be southern dewberry. Going to have white or pinkish flowers with 5 widely spaced petals. Dewberries are going to be your low-growing, more vining plants that are under a foot tall, while your blackberries are going to be a little more upright, can get really tall, 3 to 9 foot on what they call canes. Generally going to have some compound leaves, 3 to 5 leaflets, sometimes up to 7, depending on what species you're talking about. may have red or green stems. And then berries are actually an aggregate cluster of drupelets. So a druplet's going to be something like a drupe is going to be something like a cherry or a plum. And so this is just an aggregate of that. So it's a fleshy fruit surrounding a hardened seed. So the berries start green. They don't tend to stay green very long at all. They switch to kind of a pinkish to a reddish, and then ultimately finish black or purplish black. Dewberries are usually going to flower and fruit before blackberries, and they produce bigger berries, although I've seen some sources that might argue on that bigger berry side of things. Right now, the dewberries are going gangbusters out at my place here in East Texas. Should see the blackberries start flowering here before too long. And long story short, this one at the bottom is just a couple ideas of what things to look at. As far as I'm concerned, if it's got a berry, and you can definitely tell it's a rubus, it's not that important to be able to know exactly which one of the varieties you've got before you stick it in your salsa. So just make sure you've definitely got a dewberry or a blackberry, and then go ahead and let's cook it up. So the plant, this is kind of falls into the how it's going to take over the world realm. It can spread by rhizomes, and then the birds are going to plant the heck out of the seeds for you. Also, it can form roots where the tips of the plant or the nodes touch the ground. First year, you're not going to have any berries or flowers. That's called the primocane. And then the second year, you'll get the lateral branches off that primary stem, and that's where your flowers and fruit's going to form. So all these pictures right here were taken just out at my place, just to give you an idea of where all you can find it or where to look for it. This is the back of my tank dam here. It loves growing across along fence rows, and I think once again that has a lot to do with the birds planting it there for you. It will grow in the shade just fine, although maybe not often as robust as when it grows in the sun. This is one of my pastures where the hogs got out there and rooted things up a little bit, and as a result, I got lots of nice dewberry out there. And then finally, just any place that you don't mow or touch for a little bit, it seems to crop right up. So what is it really? Is it a weed? It can sure make an impenetrable barrier where you can't get in there and nothing wants to grow underneath it. Or according to one of my favorite wildlife books, is one of the most valuable plants for wildlife. Deer love to eat it, birds will nest in it. So it makes great hiding and escape cover. So this right here is a little hollow in here, and I've seen, actually, I went looking because a bird flew right in there. So critters will go in there and hunker down, and not too many things want to go chase them down through a briar patch. Excuse me. Thermal cover on really hot days. They'll go in there to get shady and rest, and then also it helps hold in the heat when it gets really cold. It makes a good insulator. Lots of things will nest in there. One thing you probably need to watch out for a little bit when you are going berry picking is sometimes you'll find a wasp nest or a hornet's nest up under all the leaves and branches, so be careful for that. And probably the thing that most commonly comes to mind is just the wildlife benefits of the food benefits. Obviously, it's going to be a great pollinator plant. Deer and rabbits will browse the leaves and twigs. And then, of course, the fruit. Everything likes the fruit. Deer will eat it, turkeys, quail, many, many, many different kinds of songbirds, large and small mammals one of the few bear sightings that I'm familiar with that has happened in my country during my tenure with Parks and Wildlife actually was a school bus driver was dropping off some kids and went down over the Sabine River, and there was a bear, I guess, on the side of the road chowing down on berries. So lots of critters like to eat them, including my dogs and me. So getting on to the recipe. This was adapted from a book. I think I've got the name of the book in the notes for you, but one of my absolute favorite things to put on maybe pork tenderloin or pork chops. It's great on chicken, good on shrimp. So you've got poblano peppers, orange juice, blackberries, onion, lime juice, habanero. You know, I got to thinking yesterday when I was making this, I almost wish that I had tried it with a chipotle pepper. So that'd definitely be something to give a whirl to if you like that smoky flavor. And then salt and cilantro are meant to taste. So go ahead and turn on the broiler or the grill and go ahead and get these peels on the peppers nice and charred. And then you can put them in a bag to kind of let them steam in there for maybe 15 minutes. And that makes it easy for you to be able to pull the peels off. So you can do this one of two ways. You can either just chop up all the ingredients and throw it in a bowl and mix it up and call it good. I am not a big chunk of onion fan. And so I go ahead and prefer just to stick it in the blender and give it a good mix. And then enjoy it. Thank y'all. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Heidi, thank you for that great presentation.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Rachel Gallen, who will speak on foraging for leafy greens. Rachel began her study of caddo culture at Stephen F. Austin State University, where she completed her undergraduate work in English and anthropology. She earned her master's degree in library and information science from the University of Texas in Austin and spent 11 years as a librarian at Stephen F. Austin. During her tenure at SFASU, she served as director of the East Texas Research Center, head of digital projects, and associate director of the library. A graduate certificate from Stephen F. Austin in resource interpretation facilitated a change in career and allowed her to return to her work with Caddo history and contemporary culture. Ms. Gallen joined the staff of Caddo Mound State Historic Site as the educator interpreter in February of 2014 and now serves as the assistant site manager. Welcome to Plant Party, Rachel. I'll turn it over to you.
Alrighty. Well, hello, everyone. So I am the assistant site manager at Caddo Mound State Historic Site in Alto, Texas. Caddo Mounds is ancient ancestral land with a continuous connection to the Caddo people for millennia. So we the Caddo have been were removed and pushed out of the area, and now the Caddo Nation is in Bangor, Oklahoma. Are very much involved in most of what we do out at Caddo Mounds. I started there in 2014, and very soon after that, I met Mark because I realized that I suddenly was obsessed with wild foods and medicine. And ever since, Mark has been coming out and doing foraging programs twice a year at Caddo Mounds. So in this picture at the bottom slide in the bottom right is a picture of me with Jackie Bullard, who's Caddo citizen and also an herbalist. And so she's been working a lot with us about plants. So it's been a really wonderful way to connect with visitors, but also with Caddo and Caddo knowledge. So I sort of balk at advanced plants because I don't feel like I'm there. And what I really want to show you today is the wealth of things that are right outside your door probably, and that you can use really easily. I'm sure there's several stages of forager and herbalist, And for me, I hesitated using things because I felt like it had to be complicated. And it is actually really, really easy to get food and medicine from wild plants. And so I'm going to go through just a few slides with plants. I'm not going to get really into the details of identification for all of these because we're going to look at a lot, but they're really common plants. And you can always go to Mark's Foraging Texas blog and see all of the identification stuff for all of these. So the first one is dandelion. And dandelion, any time of the year, is food or medicine. So you can pretty much use any part of the dandelion as a bitter to help with digestion, it's delicious. And so it's also really fun. It's fun with kids, obviously, because it has a wonderful seed head, but it has a hollow stem. So it's great in cocktails as a bittering agent, but also as a bubble wand, which is a lot of fun. Wild violets are out now all over. I'm the crazy person who moves weeds to my yard. And so now I have lots of them around my house. That's my youngest granddaughter picking violets for us to cook with. And they are full of nutrition. And the flowers are great to add to you cookies. They're edible flowers, so they're related to pansies, and you can sugar them or just make things beautiful with them. So chickweed's great. It came with the French as part of their salad garden. So you can go to fancy restaurants and find it in your salad. Medicinally, it's one I do like to use a lot. But it dissolves fatty things. So I've used it with family members who get like ganglion cysts to help dissolve those. It's really soothing and cooling, like violet, which is also really soothing and cooling. So chickweed's a good one to know if you or anybody, for pink eye or any kind of eye infection. You can kind of mash it up as a poultice and get it cold, and it's real soothing and healing for that. Cleavers are out. I'm sure a lot of people are cursing them in their yards right now. Young, I'll add them to the recipes that we have going on, but they are also a classic plant to help move lymph and clear the system in spring as a spring tonic. So we'll talk about that too. They're also a lot of fun to wear around when you find them. Wild onions, so they're all over Caddo and now all over my yard. But one thing you definitely want to remember, that if you have something that you think is an onion and it doesn't smell like an onion or a garlic, then it is not, and do not consume it. So this is plantain, and we have a couple different species of plantain around the site. But this one is also really soothing. It's a healer for anything itchy. It's any kind of rash or bite. So it's a really fun one for us to teach kids, because we kind of call it nature's Band-Aid, because you can mush it up, chew it up, and do a spit poultice and put it on anything that stings or burns. So it's great for ant bites or bee stings. The seeds of the plantain are not our species, but they're used in Metamucil. So you can use the seeds dried to add fiber to things. You can eat those little corn cobs, although that I have not done yet. But the leaves I will use in the way I prepare early spring wild greens foods. Redbuds, which are here just about gone now, but if you've never eaten a redbud, they are delightful and slightly sweet and fun to add to all sorts of things. And then corn salad, which is already going to flower here, but is another really sweet kind of green to add to salads and things. And wood sorrel or oxalis, this is a favorite of all the kids who come out to the site. We call it pickle plant sometimes. It's sour and fun to eat. And the fun thing about oxalis is there's all different varieties and they're all edible. So whether it's the ones with this yellow flower or the pink flowers that you find outside in your yard, or what you find in garden centers that are more ornamental. Okay, so let's get to recipes and preparations. I have to admit that one of my favorite thing about foraging is taking pictures of pretty baskets of foraged greens. Which is a lot of fun. And I also try to be respectful of harvesting. I mean, I think in the beginning, it's easy to get really enthusiastic about harvesting and thinking you're going to prepare all of these foods and all of these medicines and ways to use your plants. And then you have all of these plants that you have to process and not waste. So this was for a foraging class that we did, that we made wild forage green salads. And so again, this is just some of the things that I use in what I'm going to show you coming up. There's a few things in here that I didn't show you slides for. In the upper right is shepherd's purse, which is a wild mustard. It has these really cute little heart-shaped leaves. Medicinally, it stops bleeding, but it's also real peppery and fun to add to foods if you like peppery. And then just to the left of that is a yellow dock, which I'll cook up to with some of these recipes. And all the way to the left is a goosefoot, which is a Chenopodium, which we actually grow in our education garden. It's one of the first foods that the Caddo would have cultivated. So salad, so that's about as easy as it gets, right? So once you realize that these plants are growing probably right outside your door in your flower pots and all of those things, it's easy to harvest them and add to your salads. And it's just fun to make it beautiful. I would recommend adding something fatty, whether that's olive oil or avocado or cheese, to your salads, because it just helps you get the nutrients from your salads. And pesto, again, because it's so easy and so versatile. So pesto really just means paste. And so you can use any combination of things. I find myself no longer following a recipe. So I just get whatever wild greens are out there, whatever nut I have on hand, olive oil, sometimes cheese, sometimes not, garlic, salt, pepper. I included a recipe here. This is a book we carry in our gift shop, which is a beautiful, beautiful cookbook, but it's really great because it has master recipes. So you can you have that, and then you can alter it with whatever you want to add to it. So, so I really now, I make myself go out in the morning this time of year and just collect greens from my backyard and add them to my eggs. So any way you cook your eggs, you can add these greens to and saute them, and you get that, amazing nutrition from your wild greens. Plus it's just really satisfying to do, and you get to take beautiful pictures of the little greens going into your eggs. So wild greens pizza is also my new favorite thing. So I mean, it really doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to make the pizza, right? So this is a favorite frozen pizza of mine, and then I will just saute up whatever wild greens I have, and onion and garlic and whatever, fennel, anything you want to add to your pizza, pepperoni or bacon, and add that to pizza. And that is a really easy way to incorporate wild greens into your diet. And then cleavers, as I said, is a classic spring tonic among herbalists. And basically you just collect your cleavers and add water, and you can put it in the refrigerator overnight, or you can play with it. I think a lot of these things, cooking as well as herbal medicine are, Meriwether's going to disagree here, but probably, the balance of art and science, it can be a little loose, and you can have the folk medicine side of that. And so, you can add some orange to it. I added a little rosemary to this one, but it's really a lovely spring cold drink to just kind of help all that winter stagnation kind of get moving. And then, so April 13th, Meriwether will be back with us. He's doing a forage feast. And so it's a 4-hour foraging intensive, and then cooking a wonderful meal. And so if anybody's interested, I think we have a few spaces left open in that class. You can let me know, and I can let you know how to sign up. these are just some of the places that I like to get information. So plug for Mark there. And that is the cookbook where I got the recipes from. So that's what I have.
That was fantastic, Rachel. Thank you for sharing all those plants with us. I know I got a lot of great ideas. All right, we are ready to get started with our last presentation. Our final speaker, Marisa Demas, is with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Marisa has a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Human Science from Texas A&M University, Kingsville, a Master's of Arts in Human Resource Management from the University of Houston, Clear Lake, and is currently pursuing her doctorate in educational leadership from Texas A&M University, Kingsville. She has served as Duval County's extension agent, specializing in health for the past 8 years. Marisa promotes healthy living through her curriculums and recipe demonstrations. She has a training going on today, and so she pre-recorded us a recipe that you're really going to love on chickpea and cactus soup. It's delicious. But first, we wanted to start by showing you a little video on how to prepare cactus or nopalitos for eating. I'm betting we can all identify prickly pear cactus. Prickly pear are in the Opuntia genus, and that is common for cacti. So there's including 40 species and varieties just in Texas. Individual species of prickly pear can be really difficult to identify, and there's a few reasons why. One is because of environmental influence. So different ways that the environment might play on that cacti may change the way that its growth is. The extreme ranges that a single species can occupy across the state, and because they can reproduce vegetatively, as many of you know, by pad breaking away and forming new plants. Cacti like prickly pear also cross-pollinate, and so many of these species or varieties can also hybridize. Today, we're talking about not cooking with the fruits of cacti, but with the pads. So first up, I wanted to show a little video on how to prepare cactus pads for eating. And this is with Rick Bayless, who has many good videos if y'all are interested in some of his other cultural videos that he shares. So first, a little video on how to prepare cactus. All right, here's Rick.
Okay, these are the petals off the nopal cactus, and they look a little bit dangerous because they are dangerous. That's why they put these tongs here so that you can pick them up. But I'm going to encourage you not to walk past these beautiful nopal cactus petals. Number one, because they have a really wonderful, almost lemony-like taste to them. They've got a beautiful, almost crunchy texture. And from a nutritional standpoint, they really do help you to slow down the metabolism of carbohydrates. So they're really great to use like that. Now, I'm going to show you how to clean them all, but in a lot of Mexican grocery stores, you will find them already cleaned and cut up into pieces like that. Okay, or in some places you will find them just cleaned and in the full paddle. This is the one that I would suggest that you get, and then you can eliminate all of the cleaning that you would normally be doing that I'm going to show you how to do in just a second. Always be sure to hold the cactus paddle with a pair of tongs, and my first step is to go all the way around the outside, cutting off about 1/4 of an inch or so of the exterior of it. And that's just because the little thorns that are on the outside are really hard to get off. And then I like to kind of go against the grain here. You'll see that when I say against the grain, that all of these little thorns are sort of going in one direction, and I'm using my knife held perpendicular to the cactus petal to scrape them all off. Now it's sticky stuff, so I'm going to use the side of my board here to make sure that I'm not trailing them back on here. Once you've done one side, like I have, I'm about finished with now, And you want to be careful with all this. You don't want any of those little thorns to be left in here. Then you do the other side of it here. Okay, it looks pretty clean to me, and I'm going to cut it into strips, so I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise. Make sure that I don't have any of the thorns still stuck on my board there, and with about 1/2-inch slices, 1/4-inch slices I meant to say, I'm going to reduce this to a kind of sticky looking heap of those slices. Now I have bought some of these guys that were already cleaned, so you can compare my cleaning job to theirs. I think it looks sort of the same. I want to get a few more of these to cook with you, and I'm going to show you a very specific style of cooking. This is in Mexico called cooking al vapor. Now that would normally translate as steaming, but we're just going to let them cook in their own steam, their own juices. And it's a very specific style. A lot of you probably hear that boiling is the right way to go with these things, but this is really my very favorite way to do it. And it is a traditional style in certain parts of Mexico. So I've got my pan here over medium heat, and I'm going to scoop in the nopal cactus strips. I'm going to give a good douse of oil. I'm using olive oil, but you could use vegetable oil for this. These are not exact proportions, just enough so that this starts cooking in it. Nice sprinkling of salt over the top to season them as they're cooking. And then most people in Mexico like to do this with a slice or two of onion. So I'm going to cut that one off there. And then break up this onion slice. And we're going to now cover it. And we're going to cook it for 5 minutes. During this time, all of that sticky substance, what's called the baba in Mexican Spanish, will exude out of the nopal cactus. And what we are going to do is to uncover it and just let it evaporate. That's the second part of the cooking. It's been about 5 minutes now, so I'm going to uncover it. One of the things that you'll notice, come in here really close and you can see that all of that mucilaginous substance, the baba, it's already starting to evaporate, but you still see some of the gummy substance there. Well, we want to evaporate all of that, and that's what I like about this style of cooking the nopales. So another 4 minutes, 5 minutes maybe for all of that to evaporate, and then we're ready to use nopales in whatever kind of dishes we want to use them in. So this is what they'll look like when they're ready. No signs of any liquid, just a little bit of oiliness from the oil that we added to it. Turn off the fire, and then what would you use these in? Well, simplest things that you could do is just add them to a tossed salad as one of the other ingredients once they've cooled off. I like to sprinkle them with just a little bit of vinegar before I do that. Or you could chop this up and you could add it to a pico de gallo. That's really delicious. Again, vinegar on these things, they're a nice little accompaniment the next time that you're making tacos at home. That's a very traditional thing to do in Mexico. But I'll tell you what my favorite thing is the pork stew made with pork shoulder that you do in tomatillo sauce. Probably a lot of you have had that or made it because it is a very classic dish. Toward the end, you add these nopales to that mixture, maybe some potatoes, and it is one of the greatest dishes in the entire world. So explore.
All right. So that was, again, Rick Bayless, and he has a lot of great resources. You can find him on YouTube very easily. And now we want to switch over. Now notice when he harvested those, he didn't get those old rank pads. So please don't email me after you try to eat one of those old rank prickly pear pads. So what we want is when we start seeing that new green growth, those new pads that are coming up, those are the ones that you want to hold with tongs, cut off with a knife, and harvest for you to do this process with. I personally was a little bit surprised by how easy it was. So not very hard to get those thorns off and to process that right into the pan. So next up, we have Marisa Dimas. She's with, again, Texas A&M Extension, and she's talking about her chickpea soup with nopales or cacti. And so she said that this is a really great one, because of the Lenten season, and two, because these chickpeas give you a whole lot of extra protein.
Hi everyone, my name is Marisa Dimas and I'm the health agent in Duval County, and I'm going to do a recipe demonstration on garbanzos and nopales, or chickpeas and cacti. So the first thing we want to do is we want to warm up our skillet. You want to put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in your skillet. I've had my skillet warming for a while. Okay. At the same time, you want to get your nopales and cut and clean them and put them to boil in 3 cups of water. You're going to get 4 paddles of your nopales and cut them into little squares and put them to boil for 15 minutes. Okay, these are already boiled. I boiled them before just to save some time here. Okay, now that we have the oil going, we're going to add half an onion, a tomato and a half a green pepper, 1 seeded jalapeno, 1 clove of garlic diced, and about a 1/4 cup of cilantro. We're going to give this a stir. And you're going to want to cook it down until the onion becomes translucent. And I'm doing this demonstration in my office, so I'm using what I have because I don't have a full working kitchen. I have only a skillet and burners. I'll let this cook. Now, the other part of the recipe, once your nopales have begun to boil and you boil them for 15 minutes, you want to get a can of garbanzo beans. And you want to drain your garbanzo beans. You do not need to rinse them. You just want to drain them. And then once your nopales have boiled for the 15 minutes, you're going to take them out. You're going to drain them as well. And then you're going to set them aside until this part is ready for the garbanzo and the nopales. Now, I wanted to record me actually cutting the cactus and peeling them, but I didn't do that. Our cacti is rather small right now. They've just started blooming, so the petals are pretty small, at least the fresh ones, and that's what you want to use. You don't want to use a mature petal because it's not going to be as tender or as juicy. Want to make sure you cut them. You can also use the tuna of a nopal, of a cacti, as a snack. My grandparents used to snack on those all the time. Of course, you peel them, you take off the thorns, and then you can go ahead and enjoy. Now, I wanted to use something different because around here, everybody who does eat nopales, not everybody eats nopales around here, but the people who do eat nopales, they normally eat them with egg, chorizo. So I wanted to provide a different recipe so that everybody could try something new. And since it's Lenten season, this is a good way to get your protein because garbanzo beans have a lot of protein. and a good way to up your vegetable intake with this with this soup. Now, this recipe can be found on our Dinner Tonight website. I went ahead and I linked it in the beginning of the video. Now, the recipe in Spanish is the correct recipe. However, when it was translated, there's some missing ingredients in there. I went ahead and submitted the request to correct it. That may still be showing if you decide to go in the recipe yourself. Please follow this one instead. I will make sure that Dr. Clayton has a copy of the correct recipe in English so that if you want to try this recipe at home, you can. Okay. Just pushing it around, turning it around. And you want to cook this like at medium heat. Once that's done, we're going to go ahead, we're going to add the garbanzo beans, and we're going to go ahead and add the nopales. Now we're going to give this a stir as well. Make sure everything mixes well with itself. Once we've made sure that we've mixed it well, we're going to go ahead and add 3 cups of water. And we're going to cook it for 15 minutes. At the end of this time, you'll have your garbanzo and nopales sopa. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope this is another option you can include during Lent season. This is a great way to observe Lent and get your protein and try something different. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. I hope you give it a chance and let us know what you think about it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thanks to Marissa for sharing that great recipe, and thanks again to our door prize sponsors, Bamert Seed, Corteva Agri-Science, InView Range and Pasture, Native American Seed Company, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. We appreciate your support of Plant Party. Thanks again to all of our speakers and to you for attending our 14th Plant Party webinar. Again, Plant Party is a quarterly advanced plant webinar training series brought to you by USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. We will be sending a link to a short survey by email, or you can type in the address you see there on the screen and chat box. Or we'll pop up a QR code that you can simply hold your phone camera over and click on the link that pops up. Our next plant party will be on June 26th, and it'll be on monitoring native vegetation. Bring your thinking brain for some easy ways to monitor our rangelands. We'll send an email with more information to all the past registrants, and we'll see you next time.